The Battle of the Spurs or Battle of Guinegate took place on 16 August 1513, as part of the Holy League, during the ongoing Italian Wars. English and imperial troops under Henry VIII and Maximilian I surprised and routed a body of French cavalry under Jacques de la Palisse. Henry and Maximilian were besieging the town of Thérouanne in Artois. Henry's camp was at Guinegate, now called Guinegate after Thérouanne fell. Henry VIII besieged and took Tournai. Prelude. Context: Henry VIII had joined in the Holy League on 13 October 1511 with Venice and Spain to defend the papacy from its enemies and France with military force. Henry promised to attack France at Guyenne, landing 10,000 men at Hondribeer in the Basque in June 1512. This army was conveyed by the Admiral Edward Howard, and commanded by Thomas Grey, 2nd Marquis of Dorset. It remained at Bayonne until October 1512, supporting Ferdinand II of Aragon's action in the Kingdom of Navarre. Though undersupplied and in poor morale, Maximilian joined the League in November 1512. Louis XII of France hoped that Scotland would aid France against England. Siege of Thérouanne in May 1513. English soldiers began to arrive in number at Calais to join an army commanded by George Talbot, Earl of Shrewsbury, Lord Steward of the Household. Shrewsbury was appointed Lieutenant General on 12 May. John Hopton commanded the troop ships. On 17 May Henry announced to the Cinque-Ports and Edward Poynings, Constable of Dover Castle, that he would join the invasion in person, and had appointed commissioners to requisition all shipping. In Henry's absence across the sea, Catherine of Aragon would rule England and Wales as rector and governor. The Chronicle of Calais recorded the names and arrivals of Henry's aristocratic military entourage from 6 June 1513 onwards. At the end of the month the army set out for Thérouanne. Shrewsbury commanded the vanguard of 8,000, and Charles Somerset, Lord Herbert the rearward of 6,000. Henry VIII arrived in person at Calais on 30 June 1513 with the main grouping, of 11,000 men. The army was provided by Cardinal Thomas Wolsey as almoner, and comprised several different types of martial forces including cavalry, artillery, infantry and longbows using hardened steel arrows designed to penetrate armor more effectively. 800 German mercenaries marched in front of Henry. Shrewsbury set up a battery and dug mines towards the town's walls, but made little progress against the defending garrison of French and German soldiers in July. The town was held for France by Antoine de Créquy, Sieur de Pont-Remy, who returned fire until the town surrendered, and the English called one distinctive regular cannon shot the whistle. Reports of setbacks and inefficiency reached Venice. On the way to Thérouanne, 2 English cannon called John the Evangelist and the Red Gun had been abandoned, and French skirmishing hampered their recovery with loss of life. Edward Hall, the Chronicle author, mentions the role of the Henry Boucher, Earl of Essex, in this operation and the advice given by Rhys ap Thomas, an imperial agent of Margaret of Savoy, wrote that 2 obstinate men govern everything. These were Charles Brandon, Viscount Lisle, who he called the Grand Esquire, and the almoner Wolsey. Henry camped to the east of Thérouanne at a heavily defended position, described by English chronicles as environed with artillery, such as falcons, serpentines, castag bushes, trite-arrows, and spine trestles, with Henry's field accommodation consisting of a wooden cabin with an iron chimney, with large tents of blue waterwork, yellow, and white fabric, topped by the king's beasts, the lion, dragon, greyhound, antelope, and dun cow. The Emperor Maximilian came to Aix-sur-la-Lys in August. Henry donned light armor and dressed his entourage in cloth of gold and came to Aix on the 11th of August, where Maximilian's followers were still dressed in black in mourning for his wife Bianca Maria Sforza. Henry hosted Maximilian at a tent with a gallery of cloth of gold at his camp over the weekend, beginning 13 August 1513. According to the chronicles, The weather on the day of the meeting was the foulest ever. News of Henry's meeting with Maximilian in person delighted Catherine of Aragon, who wrote to Wolsey that it was an honor for Henry and would raise Maximilian's reputation. He would be taken for another man that he was before thought. Louis XII of France determined to break the siege. In July, a force of 800 Albanians commanded by Captain Fonterai pushed through the besiegers' lines and successfully delivered gunpowder and supplies including bacon to the gates of the town, leaving 80 soldiers as reinforcements. Fonterai was helped by covering artillery fire from the town. Reports sent to Venice mentioned 300 English casualties or more, and Fonterai's statement that the town could hold out till the feast day of the Nativity of the Virgin, on the 8th of September. The Venetians were aware that their French sources might have been misrepresenting the situation to gain their support. Battle. A second French attempt was organized for the 16th of August 1513, with cavalry assembled at Blagny to the south. This French force was made up of companies of gendarmes and pikemen, with some other mixed forces as well. Edward Hall described a type of French light cavalry called stradiotes, equipped with short stirrups, beaver hats, small spears, and Turkish swords. These may have been Albanian units. In response to the new threat, English military engineers had built 5 bridges overnight over the river Lys to allow their army free passage to the other side, and Henry moved his camp to Guinegate. On the 14th of August, after displacing a company of French horse armed with spears who were stationed at the Tower of Guinegate, the French infantry were left at Blagny, while the heavy cavalry were divided into 2 companies, one under the command of La Palisse and Louis, Duke of Longueville, the other under Charles IV, Duke of Alençon. Alencon's smaller force made an attack on the besieging positions commanded by Lord Shrewsbury. The larger force against the south of the besieging lines where Lord Herbert commanded. Both attacks were designed to act as diversions in order that the Stradiots be able to reach Thérouanne with supplies. Each Stradiot had a side of bacon at his saddlebow and a sack of gunpowder behind him. The French had hoped to catch the besieging army unprepared by moving out before dawn. However, the English border prickers were out and they detected the movement of the larger of the 2 bodies of French cavalry. Henry VIII drew up a field force from the siege lines, sending out a vanguard of 1,100 cavalry, following this with 10,000–12,000 infantry. La Palisse's force encountered English scouts at the village of Beaumay, 5 miles from Thérouanne. The French, realizing that the English were alert, checked themselves on the edge of a hillside. The Stradiots then began their rather forlorn attempt to contact the garrison, riding in a wide arc towards the town. La Palisse made a mistake in staying in this exposed position too long. Presumably he was doing so in order to allow the Stradiots the greatest possibility of success. The English heavy cavalry of the vanguard drew up opposite Palisse's front, while the mounted archers dismounted and shot at the French from a flanking hedgerow. Now aware of the approach of the English infantry in overwhelming numbers, La Palisse tardily ordered his force to retreat. At this point the Clarencieux Herald is said to have urged the Earl of Essex to charge. The English men-at-arms and other heavy cavalry charged, just as the French were moving off, throwing them into disorder. To complete the French disarray, the Stradiots, who had been driven off from approaching the town by cannon fire, crashed in confusion into the flank of the French heavy cavalry, whilst a body of Imperial cavalry also arrived to menace their other flank. Panic now seized the French cavalry, whose retreat became a rout. La Palisse tried to rally them, but to no effect. In order to flee more quickly, the French gendarmes threw away their lances and standards. Some even cut away the heavy armor of their horses. The chase went on for many miles until the French reached their infantry at Blagny. Meanwhile, the smaller French force had been driven off, Sir Esap Thomas capturing 4 of their standards. The initial cavalry clash took place between the village of Beaumay and Henry's camp at Guinegate. The day was soon called the Battle of the Spurs because of the haste of the French horse to leave the battlefield. In the summer of 1518, the English ambassador in Spain, Lord Berners, jokes that the French had learned to ride fast at the journey of Spurs. The same evening, the imperial master of the posts, Baptiste de Tassis, sent news of the battle to Margaret of Savoy from Aix-sur-la-Lys in Artois. Early in the day, the Emperor and the King of England encountered 8,000 French horse. The Emperor, with 2,000 only, kept them at bay until 4 in the afternoon, when they were put to flight. 100 men of arms were left upon the field, and more than 100 taken prisoners, of the best men in France, as the Sieur de Pienne, the Marquis de Rotellin, and others. Henry sent his own account to Margaret of Savoy on the following day. He mentioned that the French cavalry had first attacked Shrewsbury's position, blockading the town, capturing 44 men and wounding 22. An imperial cavalry maneuver brought the French horse within range of the guns, and the French cavalry fled. The chronicle writer Edward Hall gave a somewhat different account. Hall, who says the French called it the Battle of the Spurs, centers the action around a hill, with English archers at the village of Beaumais. He has the French cavalry break after a show of English banners organized by the Clarencieux Herald, Thomas Benault. Hall mentions that Maximilian advised Henry to deploy some artillery on another hill for outscourers, but does not mention any effect on the outcome. Although Henry wished to ride into the battle, he stayed with the Emperor's foot soldiers on the advice of his council. After a 3-mile chase, amongst the French prisoners were Jacques de la Palisse, Pierre Terrail, Seigneur de Bayard and Louis de Layens, Duke of Longueville. Although reports mention the Emperor's decision for his troops to serve under Henry's standard, Hall's account suggests friction between the English and imperial forces during the day and over prisoners taken by the Empire, who were not brought to sight and released. Henry returned to his camp at Guinegate and heard reports of the day's actions. During the fighting, the garrison of Thérouanne had come out and attacked Herbert's position. According to report, 3 English soldiers of note were killed, with 3,000 French casualties. 9 French standards were captured, with 21 noble prisoners dressed in cloth of gold. On the 20th of August, now unthreatened by French counter-attacks, Henry moved his camp from Guinegate to the south of the town. Thérouanne fell on the 22nd of August. According to diplomatic reports, the garrison were initially unimpressed by a show of captured colours, but the French and German garrison were drawn into negotiation with Shrewsbury by their lack of supplies. Shrewsbury welcomed Henry to the town and gave him the keys. 800 or 900 soldiers were set to work demolishing the walls of the town and 3 large bastions which were pushed into the deep defensive ditches. The dry ditches contained deeper pits which were designed for fires to create smoke to choke assailants. The Milanese ambassador to Maximilian, Paolo da Laude, heard that it was planned to burn the town after demolition was completed. On the 5th of September, Pope Leo X was told of the English victories by the Florentine ambassador, and his congratulations were conveyed to Cardinal Wolsey.